One of the things I get asked about a lot as a pastor is to pray for discernment or wisdom in decision making. Maybe it's about a new job, maybe it's about a relationship, maybe it's a care decision for a family member. And I'm always happy to pray for that discernment. And there's a tool that was offered to me when I was a senior in college, discerning which seminary I might choose, that I have used a lot over the years and recommended a lot over the years. Because often when we pray for discernment or wisdom, we want that billboard sign, right? God, show me what it is that you want from me. And often God speaks in much subtler ways. So how do we listen for God's leading in those circumstances? So the model that was offered to me is called the Ignatius method of discernment. Saint Ignatius is a longtime saint of the church. We know his work through a variety of concepts, but his method of discernment is particularly useful. I'm going to explain it in layman's terms, and we're going to put a sort of a step-by-step guide as an attachment if it's helpful to you along the way for whatever items of discernment you might have. So basically, it's 6 steps. And you start with prayer. God, send your spirit to guide me. Be a part of this process with me. It doesn't have to be long and wordy, effusive, or elaborate. It can simply say, God, shine your light in the midst of this decision making. The second step is you make a list, really 2 lists. You can compare option A to option B. I'm moving to Los Angeles versus I'm moving to Georgia, right? A or B. Or it could be a pro and con of the same thing. I'm deciding about whether I should retire or not in this year. So there's the pros and the cons to retirement or continuing working. You can frame it either way, but pro and con to a single sort of question point. And then you list everything on either side. Don't hold back, list everything that's there. Because part of what we find within discernment is often there's one thing that is overwhelming the conversation. Often it relates to money, right? How much is gonna cost me? How much am I gonna lose in this? What's the sort of unpredictable nature of it? Money plays a big role for a lot of us in a lot of different decisions, but it's not always that. It may be the loss of a relationship, it may be distance from family, it could be any number of things depending on what your decision is. But sometimes one piece is just glaring and loud and huge. But then we put it in line with all those other things, and it sort of creates a little bit of objectivity. So step 2, making a list. Step 3 is a number scale for each of those items. Then you go and look at each of those things individually, but within the scope of sort of that objective perspective on a scale of 1 to 3 or 0 to 3. You can do either one. 3 being this matters a lot. 1 or 0, it does not matter much or at all. You give an assigned value to each thing that you listed. It may be that that huge glaring thing does weigh a 3. It might be that that huge glaring thing in perspective is actually only a 1. Just sort of go through each one. How much does this really matter at the end of the day? Do that for both sides of your list. That's step 3. You'll do the addition there, and you should have some perspective. Often in decision making, I land somewhere in the 20s based on how many things I put on the list. Now, if the difference between your 2 lists is like 26 versus 27, it's a little too tight. Maybe you need to add some more things to your list. Maybe you need to be a little bit more discerning in the value that you're assigning. There should be some discrepancy. Maybe not 7 versus 27, but maybe 22 versus 26. Some indication of sort of there's greater weight on this one. This is sort of where I'm initially leaning. And then step 4 is to sit with it. Now, our time of sitting can vary. It helps if you have a week or two, but you can do it in just a matter of days, depending again on what you're deciding. And the time of the sitting is a time for confirmation or lack thereof. Again, we come back to prayer and we say, God, all right, I've sort of got my initial leaning. Now I need you to show me if this is really how you would have me go. Listen for confirmation. Are you seeing open doors for that path? Or is it, I thought I was going to LA and yet every single door is closing in that direction. This makes no sense. That's a cause for revision, right? But if you're thinking, I should be going to LA and another door opens and another door opens and another door opens and sort of there are multiple indicators that are heading in that direction, maybe that's your sign from God, not a billboard, but sort of these little things that stack up to be pretty conclusive in terms of seeking wisdom and guidance and direction. That's not the end of it. Step 5 is to go to a spiritual mentor that you trust. Now, it could be me as your pastor, it could be a family member, it could be somebody in your small group, somebody that's prayed for you, somebody that you trust, their own level of discernment. And you share sort of this decision making in the process and maybe where your leaning is, and you ask for their input, their guidance, and their reflections. Now, they may be just like, yes, absolutely, confirming for you, or they may be this sort of naysayer. Wait, but what about this? What about this? What about this? Now remember, this is somebody that you trust. You trust their questions. You trust their pushing. This is their job, is to sort of say, okay, have you thought about it in whole perspective? Wait, about this, you didn't mention this factor or this factor or this factor. Maybe those should go into your step 2 list and your step 3 valuing of those things. So you talk to a spiritual mentor and then you sit with it again. Step 6 is you go back to your process. Now, have you done an appropriate process? Have you invited God to work and to speak in this? Have you listened for the guidance of those that you trust? Is there a clear path, or are you just getting roadblock after roadblock, which says go back to step 1, pray again, start 2 again, and do your lists, and then you're valuing those kinds of things. It creates a little bit of perspective. Now, it's not a perfect process, but it is definitely better than waiting for a billboard, some obvious, remarkable sign that is undeniable. God speaks in all these little ways, and so I encourage you to try the Ignatius method of discernment and see just how God might be leading you for a major decision. Take care, friends.